Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, wherever you are. We are about to start our presentation for M-Trends EMEA 2016. So we have a pretty jam-packed agenda for everybody on the call today, and we're going to cover four things. First, talk about the evolution of attacks and the attack patterns, talk about new trends, and kind of consolidate this with a case study, and then go through our lessons learned in terms of what we found from responding to breaches globally and in EMEA as well. As ever, feel free to ask questions during the actual presentation, and you can type that into your question box as well. So first of all, a quick introduction to myself. My name is Bill Howe. I'm Vice President for Mandiant International. I'm responsible for the Mandiant practice outside of the US, so that's everything from the Nordics all the way around to Australia. 18 years information security professional. I started on the offensive side, did a stint on the operational side running security, and now heavily in the defensive side, helping protect governments and organizations under sustained massive attacks. So one of the things we want to talk about is, what are we seeing? So earlier this year, we published our M-Trends global report, and one of the statistics we look at is, median days before discovery. And globally, you can actually see that it's actually dropped down from 205 days to 146 days when you look at all the IRs we did it globally. And how we actually pulled out together our statistics in EMEA is we actually took the subset of incident response we've done locally to create the localized EMEA M-Trends report, which you can download, and we're going to kind of walk through today as well. So when we actually look at what we finding in EMEA, there's a couple of statistics here. First of the number of end nodes we actually investigated, so 40,000, was the average number that we looked at. And from a Mandiant point of view, the way we do our IRs is you've got to look under every rock and stone to see if there's evil there, and we'll talk a bit more about that later when we talk about our case study. In terms of our compromised hosts, 40. Number of compromised accounts, we saw 37 on average, and number of compromised admin accounts, 7. So the key takeaway I'd say from these, three statistics is, you really are looking for the needle in the haystack when you're actually doing an investigation. As everybody, most environments are in the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And when you're doing an investigation, you really are looking for, a very small percentage of the environment of what's actually happening. And this is often complicated. Once the attacker is actually inside your environment, you're pivoting from looking at, an external attacker, looking at and trying to chase down, compromised user accounts as an insider that are accessing the internal environment. Finally, stolen data volume at 2.6 gigabytes. This is what we have forensics evidence to show, when we actually do our investigations. We know in our heart it's a lot larger in terms of the amount of data stolen, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And the final statistic is, days to discover in EMEA, 469 days. So obviously significantly higher than when you actually look at the medium time to actually look at what's actually going on. So that's like 15 months. And there's a couple of reasons, there's many reasons, but a couple that kind of come to my mind around this. Number one, a lot of organizations and some governments do not have the visibility to see what's actually going internally in their networks. And also, those that do have visibility, they may not have the mandate from a jurisdiction or a law enforcement point of view to actually understand, to notify organizations, what's going on as well. I do believe that this will improve as we, in the years ahead as well. And also, within the 469 days is, in a subset of the investigations we do is we're pivoting on the back of an investigation that may have already happened within the organization internally or externally. And the organizations keep getting re-compromised, and the reason is they never actually got rid of the attackers in the first place, and that's why there's this elongation as well. One of the things we look at M-Trends is, detection mechanisms. How are our clients actually notified of the actual breach itself? So it's either from internal, as you discover it yourself, or it's an external notification by law enforcement telling you, governments telling you, or journalists ringing up and telling you that you have an issue. So you can see in 2015, globally, it's like 47% was internal and 53% was external notification of the breach. And then when we actually slice down and look into EMEA, internal notification was 88% of the actual breaches that we respond to, and 12% was external discovery, i.e. somebody ringing the organization telling them they have a problem. And I think we kind of talked around why that is in place. It's I do believe it's down to lack of visibility of the internal networks from an external point of view. In terms of the attack vectors used through our investigations, the two big sections here is social engineering and access via compromised web server. For those that are actually looking at the statistics, yes, spear phishing is social engineering, which says 25%. But what we try to do when we break down the statistics, we try to break out how much of social engineering was actually related to spear phishing. So social engineering in total is 38%, and of that 38%, 25% was via spear phishing activity. Next up, to kind of look through, what were the attackers after? What kind of information were they after? So from the forensic artifacts that we can confirm positively on, there's a lot of technical data that they were after, as you can see here, and there's a lot of financial data here as well. But in all reality, this is from the forensic artifacts that we found in our investigation. But if you think about it, if the attackers are in the environment for 15 months, they can take anything they want, or they can take everything out of the environment. So in terms of, what are the new trends? So we do a lot of what we call red teaming, and what we kind of want to walk through is kind of three trends that we see emerged in 2015 last year. Kind of credentials. So surprising or not, most organizations still haven't fixed the password problems, and many organizations from doing our red team exercises are still struggling with forcing users to use complex passwords that are sufficiently complex and difficult to actually guess, and that's probably not too much of a surprise for most of the audience here. The other thing was the inability to detect targeted attacks or differentiate between those and commodity activity from legitimate threat actors. So that's still an issue in terms of from visibility and education point of view. And finally, poor egress controls in terms of a lot of organizations have spent a lot of time and money in hardening the perimeter, but they're limiting, in terms of traffic going outside the network, this seems to remain a lower priority. And those of you that have done investigation know this is how they maintain, command and control, and gain access, externally back out from the internet as well. So I'm going to move forward into the case study, into the case study. So let me kind of run you through the incident. So this was an incident that we investigated last year. It was a multinational organization with a lot of business unit areas. They had thousands of endpoints in their environments, and the actual first incident actually occurred in the Far East. And the main security team was based in Europe. And within that, most organizations that we work with, they have many divisions. They had 4 in this case, and each of those divisions had a separate CISO and IT staff for each of those divisions. And for any action to occur, we need to get a common agreement amongst everybody, around the team to make sure we can go forward with the scope of our investigation. Luckily for us, they had a very good security team. They knew exactly, what some of the issues were very good technically, and helped us in our investigations as we move forward. So normally what we arrive on site, and this is no different to this client here, they were kind of playing whack-a-mole, where you find a piece of you find a binary that's malicious, you submit it to the AV vendor, you get a signature for it, you deploy it, and the attacker changes the binaries again so it doesn't detect, and you go around this loop. The thing here was the attacker themselves could have remained longer in that environment if they didn't keep dropping the malware, because they already had compromised the actual accounts themselves. So I want to kind of digress, and we talked earlier in the discussion about scope, and where the Mandiant approach is, you have to look under every rock and stone to kind of determine if there's evil there. What we find a lot of organisations doing is, relying on the traditional approach to forensics. So, which is very good for certain use cases. For example, if Fred has inappropriate material on his machine, you take an image of that, of that machine, you bag and tag it, you do the analyze it over a couple of days, and then you get your results of what's happening on a static machine. In the realms of where we play, in terms of the advanced threat actors that come in and come out and access the whole environment, that approach is very, very slow and doesn't scale to actually dealing with the threat and the attack itself. So as we know that incidents themselves are very rarely linear, and we'll kind of walk through that in a minute. That you normally have a lot of patient zeros in the environment. There's a lot of pivot points for lateral movement in the environment. And over a period of time, if you think by the time we look at the investigation, it's 15 months, a lot of those forensic artifacts do disappear over time. And for the less experienced forensicators, then they get kind of stuck down the rat hole with commodity malware and kind of chase that in terms of trying and sort out what's going on in the environment. So from the Mandiant point of view, as I said, we look under every rock and stone to work out what's going on. So when we normally come on client sites, this is normally what we see. We see a whole load of machines out there. There'll be a lot of compromised hosts. There'll be a lot of hosts that have been accessed with compromised user credentials out in the environment, and we have to kind of determine what has actually happened in that environment. So how we do it is we deploy our IOCs, our indicators of compromise, and we actually sweep the environment to see what's going on. And we'll get a couple of hits in that environment in terms of what's going on in there. And as we kind of review what's going in the environment, we'll see a lot of commodity malware out there. So we will kind of deselect that from our investigation and move forward. And as you can see, we've taken it out of the slide deck here. And as we carry on with the investigations, then we will see, compromised accounts that are used to access other machines, and that helps us kind of build out the picture of what's actually going on the ground. Quite often, when we're actually in an environment, we will find other threat actors in the environment. Sorry, my screen went wrong. So we may find other threat actors in that environment. So what we do there is we kind of remove those from the existing investigation, and we also do a parallel track on that piece as well. And one of the things that our clients are always asking us, and why we're there, is to understand how the attackers got in, and where patient zero is to try and help identify that information. And here you can see the use case of it could be a spear phishing campaign on one machine or on many machines in that environment. So one thing I do want to kind of point out from this is if we use the traditional approach and we're lucky enough to get the machine in the center, then we have a lot of artifacts that we can spindle off in terms of from the traditional approach and spider out. If the actual investigator, the machine that they look at is the one on the far right, which has no links to anything, what normally happens in a lot of organizations is they'll take that machine, they know it's infected, they'll re-image it and throw it back on the network, but they'll have missed the whole scope of the incident on the left-hand side. So knowing how we actually how we approach our investigations, let me kind of walk back into the incident summary so you kind of understand some of these metrics themselves. So for this actual incident itself, there were 33 compromised machines. 32 accounts were attempted to use or used as for a part of the compromise. And we found data staging because we found four raw files in the environment. 2 of them were encrypted and 2 of them were not encrypted. The earliest date of compromise was in 2015, January. And from an attacker's details, it was like a new attack group. And the most recent activity was in April of that year. Other indicator metrics we have what we call network-based indicators. We had 26 of those. We found 32 pieces of malware in the environment, and we did what we call live response LRs on 57 of the boxes in the environment, and we actually ripped apart 7 specific pieces of malware in that environment as well. In terms of technically how the actual construct of the attack happened, it followed this way. So the attacker actually sent a targeted spear phishing email to the US team, and they forwarded that to the Far East APJ team. Then what the user did in the APJ team was download and execute the malicious file using an unknown Windows vulnerability and installs the SOGU Trojan variant. Then the attacker goes in and he infects more machines using different variants of SOGU, Lila Coca and Home Unix using scheduled task and WMI. And then they complete their mission by placing encrypted raw files on the external facing website server in APJ. In terms of the spear phishing email, this was a redacted version of the spear phishing email, and it's quite important to kind of read this one out to see how you and your organizations may react to this. So it's from a journalist. We faked this up, and it says, words to this effect: "Hello, I'm a reporter for XYZ News, and my name is John. We received anonymous pictures of a man having an inappropriate activity in APJ country. The pictures show that after inappropriate activity, the man abused the girl who looks underage. We also have information that the man booked under your client company name. We tried to contact your PR department and failed. Our only alternative is to contact you via publicly available email. Here's the link to the photos. We hope you can help identify the man or just help forward this email to someone who might. We would appreciate it and thank you. Plus, if we do not receive any feedback in the next feedback, we'll make this picture available within 3 days." So there's a time pressure to this as well. So this is the email that circulated around. The actual link actually led to a very realistic, exact copy of the spoofed journalist international website, and asked them to download the actual the photos here as well. So this is the kind of the flow of the client communication. So the PR team forwards the email to the Far East office to kind of confirm the validity of the actual email. And the office senior manager asked the IT staff to confirm legitimacy. So they're looking at, let's make sure it's accurate, it's valid, and there's no nasties in it. And obviously there's a time pressure. If you think about the time zone differences between the US and the Far East, and you've got a 3-day clock that's ticking, there's a lot of time pressure in that environment to get results. So the IT staff confirms validity. They take the MD5 hash and check it against virus total, and it comes back clean. And so it comes back clean, and the IT staff said thumbs up, and they forward it to the rest of the organization, who then get infected. In terms of the type of malware we found during this investigation, SOGU, X, that's obviously the backdoor. That was the patient zero infection, and it was used as the persistent mechanism. Sorry. And during the time we were actually doing the investigation, it kept changing, and we found 6 variants as we were actually doing the investigation itself. They actually pivoted to the home Unix backdoor when they actually kept getting stopped by the AV. So that's why we see the 2 different types of malware in that environment. So in terms of attribution, it was what we call UNC group, an unknown group. We created a group to specifically track this, to track them. We believe they have been operated since 2014 with links to PRC based on the use of SOGU. Also, we found C2 infrastructure located in China, Hong Kong, and Japan. And we've seen this kind of TTP before as well. In terms of our investigation observations, it was a fairly sophisticated method of compromise, but operationally it was very noisy. So what we're finding is, there's a lot of noise in the environments, and they didn't try and cover their tracks, and so we could detect them. And they continually deployed new malware, even though they had a different method of entry and compromise. And they also make sure they had their access was valid by using the compromised credentials to try and log into the systems as well. So when you kind of break this into mirror this onto the attack life cycle, we kind of go through, attackers will do the initial recon, they'll do the initial compromise, they'll establish a foothold, they'll escalate the privileges, they'll do the internal recon, and then they'll complete the mission. So we map what was going on to the activities themselves. The initial recon we're not too sure of. The actual initial compromise, it was in January, and there's obviously that phishing email that I showed earlier with that URL, which download that SOGU Trojan. They obviously established a foothold. They escalated the privileges in that environment by credential dumping on patient 0 and moved laterally through the environment. They did an internal recon. We're actually using valid system tools within the environment and dump credentials. They moved laterally using scheduled jobs and WMI, which is a common methodology now to access workstations in APJ and Europe. And they maintained persistence with multiple local domain accounts and making sure they secured their logins as well. And they completed their mission using the encrypted RAR, as you saw also as well. So in terms from a remediation point of view, what was the remediation plan? The biggest challenge we see in any investigations is kind of password resets. One of the first things that normally clients say, is let's do a password, let's reset all our passwords. Obviously forgetting that they have hard-coded passwords in legacy applications, and they have, a lot of dependence on local accounts for other services as well. So, that is a big issue for a lot of clients. In terms of a list of recommendations, we recommend, enhanced logging. One of the things that we do see when we do investigations is sometimes there are no log files, or there's very little log files, or they've overwritten those log files. So kind of enhanced logging, whitelisting, the usual prevention of local storage of weak passwords, LAN passwords, two-factor authentication, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And concentrate egress points. There's a lot of things that the client could do to help fix their environment. So that was a quick run through that kind of use case and to kind of help you understand the size and the type and how we do investigations. Now I'm going to kind of talk about, globally, what have we learned in terms of doing investigations and recommendations. So there's kind of 10 things that we kind of talk about, how to handle business disruptive attacks. first thing of all is, first of all, confirm there is a breach. And second, remember that human adversaries are unpredictable. And it's also depending on what who the threat actors are themselves. Timing is critical. You've got to validate and scope very fast in terms of once you have the breach, and stay focused on the mission in terms of what you're trying to do and what you investigate. Sometimes you have to evaluate whether to confront the attacker, and obviously remember that they are unpredictable. And before a breach, hopefully engage your forensics and legal and PR experts to make sure that you have those in line. We see a lot of ransomware that is out there, so consider all your options when asked to pay the ransom, and ensure you have strong segmentation and controls over the backups as well. Sometimes you find the attackers have actually infected the backups as well. After your incident, focus on the broader security improvements, and always remember, once it's kicked out, the attackers may try and come back in to maintain their persistence and get back into the environment as well. For booking it on the wish list in terms of recommendations, we still find a lot of clients out there that do not have dual factor authentication in 2016, and they still have single factor authentication on the external perimeter, and also the use of jump servers. Monitor the use of your privileged accounts. Key thing is to have an incident response plan that is robust and that is tested, and that's not 2 years old in the back of the drawer. And also, when you think about the attack perspective, think about it from the perspective of the attacker. So I've been over a lot in the past in 30 minutes, and I wanted to leave some time for Q&A. I thought there may be quite a lot of Q&A. So I'm going to open it for Q&A and then take it from there. So any questions from the audience? So some questions are coming in. Okay, so questions I have is, how do you see the trends over the next changing over the next couple of years? So what I believe is what we presented here is a peg in the sand now in terms of what we've seen from the past year from our responses in EMEA. I think as we go forward, as more and more people respond to breaches, and we respond to more breaches and more educated, and I do believe things like dwell time and will go down as people get better visibility in their network. Other questions I have are, in terms of data exfiltration, is that an accurate figure? I think I said it was about 2 gig. So what we're presenting there is the actual, when we actually do the investigations, we find the artifacts of those data. That's what we can actually report on. When we actually do investigations, a lot of evidence, isn't there because it's missing because companies don't log. So, we know there is a lot of, there's a lot more data that has gone out the network, but we have no evidence to actually say, hey, it's 100 gig rather than, 6 gig or whatever it is. So the question here is, how aware were the senior executives, and how did you keep them briefed? So what we normally find when we do the investigations, if they have done incident response planning, then that will kick into motion, and you'll have an executive steering team, having your operational team that will respond to the incident. Normally they don't. Normally it doesn't get triggered. Normally the plan is out of date, so the people that are actually on the plan, aren't in the organisation before. In this use case, it was very much kept at an operational level, the investigation, and then there was a monthly meeting with the execs of the company to kind of give them an out briefing of what was actually going on. So what did the security team miss in their review of the initial email? So what they did was they submitted the binary to a well-known mechanism out there, VirusTotal, that came back clean because it wasn't known in their signature. Ransomware. How do we educate and avoid such attacks? So yeah, CryptoLocker has been very, it's been a big issue over the past year. A lot of companies and a lot of individuals have been hit with that. And when companies, how do we educate on that? It's kind of like, how do you need to kind of protect your systems, and the normal education stuff we know from a security point of view. From an investigation point of view, I would say a lot of companies do pay up because the cost to investigate and the cost to fix compared to how much they request to release the data is worlds apart. So business sometimes make a cost benefit analysis decision in terms of what they're actually going to do. I'm going to take a couple more questions. So I'm just kind of running through them. Some of them I can't answer straight away. So a question on how many organisations have a response plan when we normally go on site. I would think I would say a majority have some form of a response plan ready, in the 50%. The question is, have they tested them, and is it relevant? And more often than not, it hasn't been tested, and it's not relevant to the current attacks that are out there. Okay, I'll just take one final question, and then feel free to obviously email us with any questions as well. When do we expect the next M-Trends report coming out? So it'll be roughly this time next year in terms of the next M-Trends report. As I said, the current one you can download now and kind of review. Hopefully it's a very useful document. It has a lot of good content in there. And with that, I'll thank everybody for their time, and feel free to email us with any other questions you have. Thank you very much.